Humans believe the ocean is dangerous because of what lives in it, but the real danger begins long before any creature appears, because the deeper you go, the ocean quietly removes the conditions your brain needs to stay stable. As depth increases, light fades, sound becomes unreliable, time loses structure, and pressure begins altering brain chemistry itself, creating psychological stress that no amount of training can fully erase. Divers, submariners, and deep-sea explorers have repeatedly reported that long before the body reaches its physical limits, the mind begins to struggle with disorientation, anxiety, and loss of control. Even in zones where nothing is actively going wrong, the human brain reacts as if it is under threat because it evolved for open space, visible horizons, and escape routes, not endless darkness and crushing isolation. This is why some parts of the ocean are not just physically dangerous, but psychologically incompatible with the human mind, and as we move deeper through each ocean zone, the environment itself begins to work against human perception, judgment, and emotional stability. In the sunlight zone, extending from the surface to roughly 200 meters, humans still feel relatively comfortable. And this is where recreational diving takes place, yet even here the brain begins to misinterpret reality. At modest depths, compressed air causes nitrogen to dissolve into the bloodstream and enter the brain, producing nitrogen narcosis, a condition divers describe as feeling intoxicated, where judgment slows, risk assessment collapses, and decision-making becomes unreliable. This altered mental state is dangerous because it often creates false confidence, causing divers to underestimate risks or ignore early warning signs, which leads to many underwater accidents. Panic is also common in this zone, particularly in low visibility or cold water, and panic underwater is uniquely dangerous because instinctive responses like rapid breathing and uncontrolled ascent can trigger decompression sickness, where gas bubbles form inside the body and damage tissues and the nervous system. As humans descend past 200 meters into the twilight zone, sunlight fades almost entirely, and the brain loses one of its most important anchors, visual reference. Depth perception becomes unreliable, orientation becomes difficult, and time perception begins to distort as the body no longer receives normal day-night cues. Divers entering this zone rely completely on artificial light and instruments, and psychologically, this creates sensory deprivation, a state where the brain lacks enough external input and begins compensating in unhealthy ways. Anxiety increases, disorientation becomes more common, and the feeling of isolation intensifies because there is no visible environment beyond the narrow beam of a dive light. Physically, the pressure becomes too great for normal breathing air, forcing divers to use complex gas mixtures and rebreather systems that are extremely sensitive to failure, meaning a small malfunction can cause oxygen toxicity, carbon dioxide buildup, or loss of consciousness. Unlike surface environments, a diver in the twilight zone cannot escape quickly because surfacing too fast would be fatal, and this knowledge alone creates constant psychological tension. Beyond 1,000 meters, the ocean enters the midnight zone, an environment so hostile that humans cannot enter it directly and must rely on pressurized submersibles to survive. Outside the vessel, temperatures hover near freezing, and pressure increases to hundreds of times that at the surface, while inside, the human experience becomes dominated by confinement and dependence on technology. The cabins of deep-sea submersibles are small, movement is restricted, and every sound, vibration, or creak in the hull becomes a reminder of the immense force surrounding the vessel. The absence of natural light completely disrupts circadian rhythms, leading to fatigue, cognitive slowing, and emotional instability, even in highly trained crews. Submariners and deep-sea explorers consistently report heightened anxiety, irritability, and mental exhaustion, not because something is actively going wrong, but because the environment offers no reassurance and no margin for error. In this zone, the human brain struggles with the constant awareness that survival depends entirely on machines functioning perfectly. At depths below 4,000 meters, known as the abyssal zone, the psychological burden intensifies further as the pressure becomes so extreme that any structural failure would result in instant death. This zone has been reached only by a small number of deep-diving vehicles, and the people inside them describe a persistent sense of helplessness because there is nothing they can do to influence their surroundings. The human stress response evolved to allow action, escape, or defense, but in the abyss, none of these are possible, and the brain is forced to remain alert without the ability to respond. This sustained helplessness creates a unique mental strain where focus becomes narrow, emotions flatten, and thoughts center almost entirely on monitoring systems and survival indicators. Recent deep-sea incidents have shown that even advanced technology cannot fully protect humans at these depths, reinforcing the psychological reality that control is an illusion in the abyss. The deepest region of all, the Hadal zone, includes ocean trenches that descend deeper than any mountain on Earth is tall, and only a handful of humans have ever reached these depths. Those who have described an environment defined not by fear, but by emptiness, where absolute darkness, near total silence, and crushing pressure create a sensory vacuum. Even powerful lights reveal very little, often illuminating only clouds of fine sediment that obscure any meaningful view of the environment. Psychologically, this absence of sensory input causes the mind to withdraw inward, reducing emotional intensity and narrowing thought processes as a form of self-preservation. Researchers studying extreme isolation warn that prolonged exposure to such conditions can disrupt emotional regulation, identity, and cognitive performance, which is why deep Hadal missions are kept extremely short. The ocean at this depth is not something the human mind can engage with because it provides nothing for the mind to interpret. Across every ocean zone, a consistent pattern emerges, showing that as depth increases, the ocean systematically removes light, space, sensory input, autonomy, and the possibility of escape, all of which are essential for human psychological stability. While technology allows us to visit these environments briefly, it does not change the fact that the human brain evolved for open air, visible horizons, and immediate feedback from its surroundings. The ocean does not need violence to repel us, because simply remaining in these depths long enough is enough to overwhelm the human mind. This is why, despite centuries of exploration and modern engineering, most of the ocean remains unexplored, not because we lack machines, but because we were never psychologically built to be there.